places that are fun to spend time in and walk around. So what is it about these old neighborhood places like this that are inviting and say, yeah, this is a place I could live. This is a place that I would like to spend time. Or downtowns like this, your old downtowns. You know, in our old downtowns that look like this is the place where if visitors come to town, you like to bring them. If companies have recruits, potential recruits they're flying in, this is the sort of place they take them. You know, after work, this is the sort of place where you see people milling around and walking down the street. Unfortunately, how we build our neighborhoods today, things have changed. Our residential neighborhoods don't look the same. Our commercial areas don't look the same. You know, they just don't feel the same. So when you look at places where people like to spend their tourist dollars, where they like to go when they're on vacation, where do they go? They go to places with great urbanism. A lot of people like to. Places like San Francisco, or the gas lamp of San Diego, or New York, Philadelphia, or the great cities of Europe. And what are they doing when they go to these places? You know, they're going there for the art, the culture, the museums. And really, if you look at what they're doing, they're just enjoying spending a great time in great urbanism, walking around and enjoying the city. And then when you get back from your vacation or your company conference, this is the built environment on the bottom that welcomes you home. This just isn't a fun place to spend time, you know? So you drive there, you get in, and you get out. If you look, there's a car dealership on the right and a Subway across the street. I'd be willing to bet if you were at that car dealership and were hungry and wanted to go to Subway, 95 out of 100 people will get in their car and drive across the street. And it isn't that they can't walk over there, it's just not desirable to walk over there. It's not a desirable environment to spend your time. So what I'm going to talk about today is the history of street design and how it's changed in America and dictated the cities that we live in now. I'm going to start off, or I'm going to go, then I'm going to get into like placemaking, and that's about all we'll have the time for. So here's a typical residential neighborhood in an old part of a city. Could be anywhere in America. And on the right is what you see in a typical new subdivision anywhere in America. On the left is a typical commercial setting in an old part of town. And on the right is a typical commercial setting in a new part of town. And it's just not the same. And what's happening is the interstate design system is trickling down to our cities. So you have to understand, as cars became prevalent, there were car crashes. And we had more crashes and as we got more cars. So traffic safety was born. Federal and state agencies started working on the problem. So here you have the interstate design system when it was first brought out in the 50s. And there was a lot of pioneering techniques that were brought out by the engineers to make the roads safer or more forgiving, as they would say. They widened the roads. They removed roadside trees. They removed buildings. They increased the sight lines greatly. They made the curves gentle and swooping. And then back then the speed limit was 55 miles an hour, but they designed the road to be driven safely at a much higher design speed. And you know what? This made our interstates much safer. So what happened in the 60s was there was a set of hearings the federal government had with a bunch of traffic engineers, and they said, you know what? We've made our interstates so much safer with these design techniques. Let's try this approach to our cities. And so here you have a traditional street design, and then we went to bigger, wider, faster. So there's a growing body of evidence, though, that from planners and engineers that study this that are questioning whether this actually works. This is a study from Florida. On the left, you'll see East Colonial Boulevard in the old part of town. On the right, you'll see East Colonial Boulevard in the new part of town. Same traffic volumes of people driving down the street. But you'll see on the new part of town, they've used modern design techniques. They've widened the roads. They've set the buildings way back. They've removed the parked cars, all in the name of making this safer. But is it safer? No, it's not. The old section of town where you have all these things you could run into, parked cars, people dodging out, the sight lines are nowhere near as good. The new section of town has 25% more crashes. The old section of town has 25% fewer fatalities, 25% fewer injuries, and 100% fewer fatalities. There's a marked difference between the safety of the old style of street design versus the new style. And the reason because of this is we all ignore posted speed limits. You can ask a cop, you can read the studies. People drive they look at the environment, and then if the environment's telling them it's safe to speed, they drive that speed. So what happens is, this is a typical residential neighborhood. That's posted 25 miles an hour. But if you get your radar gun out, nobody drives 25 miles an hour. They're driving 30 miles an hour, 35 miles an hour. This is a typical arterial street in America. It's posted 35 miles an hour. But if you were to take the radar gun out, you're going to find that people are driving 40 and 45 miles an hour. So we've designed our streets like this to make them safer, but all it's done is making it permissive to speed. And so as people start speeding, their caution decreases and their speed increases. And so then you have a bunch of people driving too fast for conditions, and that's when accidents occur. So here's a study that shows a correlation between street width and 85th percentile speeds. And you'll find that the narrower the street, the slower people drive. So if you want people to drive really fast, just design a big wide street and they'll start driving fast. So here's a study that looks at street width versus accident injury rates. You'll find that in most cities in America, including Twin Falls, the minimum street width to build a street is 36 feet. What that results in is a 487% increase in injury rates versus the narrowest of old city streets you'll find in an old neighborhood. It used to be that the shaded area to the left was illegal in most cities. Now it's getting to the point, here included, everywhere to the left of the highest point on this chart is illegal to build in this city. So let's talk about street design for the last 100 years. At the earliest part of the 20th century, we built traditional streets. And by traditional, I mean tree-lined streets on a short gridded block system with buildings set close to the streets. So did Europe. Back then, the UK had the safest streets in the world, by far. The United States, second safest streets. So we weren't doing too bad. Then come the highway safety hearings I talked about in the 60s, where we decided we were going to try to use the interstate approach to our cities to make them safer. Well, what happened? We started using the interstate approach. Europe still builds the same way. If you've ever been to the UK, you'll find that they still build really boxed in narrow streets. Well, the UK still has the safest streets in the world. America, dead last. We have the highest fatality rates per capita. We have the highest fatality rates per vehicle ownership. And if you account for, the fairest comparison is exposure, when you account for the fact that we drive more than Europeans. We still have the least safest, highest fatality rate of any developed country in the world by far. The Bulgarians beat us. Everybody beats us. So some fundamental requirements for designing great places. You need to create sense of place. So to create sense of place in a place where people want to be around, you need to follow some certain design aspects. So to create sense of place, and let me talk about sense of place here. Sense of place is this ambiguous buzzword that you'll hear thrown out by architects and planners and designers, and nobody ever really defines it, so it becomes this mysterious thing that nobody's quite sure of. And so if you look at these great examples of urbanism, they all have sense of place. These are all places where we'd enjoy going and spending our tourist dollars. And these cities get lots of tourists. And then you look at residential neighborhoods that have sense of place. You know, we see these nice tree-lined streets, and it just evokes a good feeling. Well, what is it that makes sense of place? It's really simple. All you need to do is bring your buildings close to the street. You need to build at these height to width ratios, 1:1, 1:3. 1:6 you can almost get away with in residential, but not really. But if you add shade trees, you'll get spatial enclosure. And the reason spatial enclosure is important is because we like it as humans. We're hardwired to like it. That's why ornamental trees don't work. You can't plant an ornamental tree and expect to get spatial enclosure in an inviting place. So if you look at all of these famous pictures of urbanism, they all follow these rules. of height to width ratios. And if you think of the places in our city that are built old, we all follow these same ratios too downtown. And our old neighborhoods follow these ratios, especially with the trees we have planted on our old blocks, on our old avenues, and our old residentials. And so the thing about spatial enclosure that makes people like it is when you're standing on the sidewalk and you look down the street, you see more building and stuff on the side in your peripheral vision than you do horizon on the space. And we as humans find that very inviting. It's a very simple thing. We don't do it. Everybody else in the world still does it. And so the reason we like this is the design world calls this prospect and refuge. We're kind of evolutionary. It's kind of built into us evolutionary. So think if you're the hunter here 20,000 years ago, and you're walking down the side of this clearing. You're going to walk down the side of this clearing, and you're going to be able to see and not be seen. And we find that very inviting as humans. If something scares us, we can dart off into the forest and be hidden and saved. And so over the millennia, it's become hardwired into us. And so we like our built environments to mimic it as well. So in this, you'll see the prospect is the street, and the refuge is the buildings. And for this to work, you need to have windows and doors facing the street, and you must have clear glass. People like to be able to walk down and see what's inside, and the buildings provide that symbolic refuge where you're walking and see something you can dart in, or see somebody you don't want to see, you can hide from them. But the problem is we've lost that art. We don't build on the height to width ratios anymore. And so it creates socially uninviting places. And it isn't the fault of the homeowners. They just bought the homes. And it isn't really the fault of the developers, because they're just following the building codes. And really it isn't the fault of the cities, because every city has just kind of adopted the same code. And we all just keep doing the same thing. And that's why all our cities in the new parts of town, they all look alike. That's why our historic districts are the only thing that set us apart from other cities. And I think my time's probably up, so I'm going to stop it here. I have 3 more minutes? Okay, we'll go on. Okay, so here's some examples of urbanism that doesn't work. Tinted glass. Nobody wants to walk along tinted glass in their shopping district. Retail studies show that if you have 50 feet of dead space, people will turn around and go the other way. Same with our residential neighborhoods. Do you think that many people are walking along that sidewalk up there? No. Precast concrete buildings? No. Socially isolating. We as humans are very social people. And you can tell that we like to be social people. If you drive through a neighborhood that looks like this on a nice Sunday afternoon, what do you see? You see a garage door up and maybe a lawn chair out there and somebody just sitting there waiting for the world to come by to, hopefully talk to. Because we don't have front porches on our houses anymore. That's not an environment that's pleasing to humans. Front-loading garage after front-loading garage after front-loading garage. I'm going to skip ahead. Okay, so I'm going to talk about, this is a new style development of residence building that can be done. We can build nice houses that work. Sorry, I'm looking for one certain slide here, and I'll finish on it. Oh, here's a funny one. When I was your age, you always hear people are always shaming their kids into when I was your age, I walked 20 miles uphill both ways. What are the kids the kids today going to tell their kids? When I was your age, I walked both to the SUV uphill both ways. And so it's not that kids don't want to walk anymore, it's that we don't build environments that are permissive or safe or easy for our kids to be walking anymore. So we've created a society where the kids grow up being carted around everywhere. And that's why you'll see the resurgence of urbanism everywhere. And that's why millennials are steering away from cars. They've grown up in the suburbs. They've been carted around everywhere their whole life. And that's why they're steering away from car ownership. And they're wanting to move back to downtowns where they don't have to live their life by a car. And I'm gonna end that right there. on designing cities. There's a whole, I could go on for this for hours.